palace door. She calls it the portal of Hades. Thus I bid thee hail. And she is on her way to walk into the castle. And as she does so, she says, friends, there is no avoidance in delay. I know the day is come, flight were small gain to me. All fame is happy, even famous death. And in many ways you could argue that this play could have easily been called the Cassandra. And understandably so. I've had students who in fact say this is some of the most pathetic kinds of lines of poetry, because she knows what's about to happen. She can't keep it from happening. Delaying it isn't going to help her situation. And so she will go in and she says it, I dare to die. She is, in fact, the chorus will say, she is brave to the last, right? I mourn thy doom foreseen. And sure enough, that's exactly how it goes down. Two cries happen. Now let's finish the play quickly. Two cries happen. Both of them, of course, are Agamemnon and Cassandra. They're both slaughtered. Agamemnon, invited to take a bath. While he's in the bath, and he's exposed, the net, of course, placed over him. And then together, Clytemnestra and her lover Aeschylus will kill Agamemnon by several blows, not just one. And in fact, Agamemnon screams out, oh, there's a blow, oh, there's another blow, that kind of thing. And of course, the chorus is horrified by what it is that they're hearing. And then, of course, Cassandra herself will also get jacked. And then, of course, you've got the final scenes. And the final scenes are Clytemnestra coming on stage. She's going to pull back, disclosing Clytemnestra. She's going to pull back, and there's the body of Agamemnon, muffled in a long robe, and then you have the corpse of Cassandra is laid down beside him. She's killed both of them. When she comes on stage, right, now remember that for the Greeks, I mean, if you watch this play today, obviously Cassandra or Clytemnestra will come on stage, and she'll have obviously a defiant face. But remember, when this play was viewed, there were masks, right? But the language is language of defiance. Absolutely no remorse of any kind, right? And she will provide, or begin to provide, her defense. Ho! Ye who heard me speak so long and oft, the glossing word that led me to my will, hear how I shrink not to unsay it all. I did exactly what I told you I was going to do, in other words. How else should one who willeth to requite evil for evil to an enemy disguise this friend? Weave the mesh straightly round him. Notice the beauty of the symbolism. Not to be o'erleaped, a net of doom. This is the sum and issue of old strife, of me deep pondered and at length fulfilled. All is avowed, and as I smote, I stand with foot set firm upon a finished thing. I did exactly what I told you I was going to do, and I'm proud of myself for having done it. The chorus, of course, will say, I marvel at thy tongue's audacity to vaunt this lordly over a husband slain. In other words, it's one thing to kill the man. It's another thing to kill the man and gloat about it. Clytemnestra's having none of it. She's like, oh, no. I waited a long time to get this, and I will enjoy this moment. Absolutely. But she's got to give a defense. There's got to be some reason why it's the right thing to do to invite your husband into his home after he comes back from winning the war, put him in a bathtub, and then jack him with your lover there. There's got to be... Now, the chorus doesn't know about the lover yet. She hasn't told them yet about Aeschylus. But she does say this. O ye just men, she's speaking to the chorus, who speak my sentence now, the city's hate, the ban of all my realm. Ye had no voice of old to launch such doom on him, my husband, when ye held as light my daughter's life as that of sheep or goat, one victim from the thronging fleecy fold. Yea, slew in sacrifice his child and mine, the well-loved issue of my travail pangs, to lull and lay the gulls that blew from Thrace. That deed of his, I say, that stain and shame, he rightly been atoned by banishment. But ye, who then were dumb, are stern to judge this deed of mine that doth affront your ears. Storm out your threats, yet knowing this forsooth, that I am ready, if your hand prevail, as mine now doth, to bow beneath your sway. If God say nay, it shall be yours to learn by chastisement a late humility, totally defiant, and will say, I'm totally in the right because Agamemnon, my husband, killed Iphigenia and therefore sacrificed her like a goat, and therefore he got what he deserved. The chorus will respond, bold is thy craft and proud. Now, we can go back to an earlier lecture and the idea that in these plays, the protagonists fall because of pride. Well, we've already seen the pride of Agamemnon, walking on that purple robe, on the purple net laying out, right, those tapestries. And here, notice, bold is thy craft, the chorus says to Clytemnestra, and proud, thy confidence, thy vaunting loud, thy soul that chose a murderous fate is all with blood elate, maddened to know the blood not yet avenged, the damned spot crimson upon thy brow. We immediately, with the damned spot, think about Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth, out damned spot, and all of that, right? But fate prepares for thee thy lot, smitten as thou didst smite, without a friend, to meet thine end. It's at this point, the chorus, borrowing, of course, from the prophecy of Cassandra, you're going to go down. It's just a matter of time. You're going to go down. Of course, you can imagine that as the chorus is preaching, right, Clytemnestra is going to respond. Agamemnon was unfaithful with Chryses, therefore he gets what he deserves. So notice, she moves to suggest not only did he sacrifice our daughter Iphigenia, but he also was unfaithful to me. He was away messing around, and for that he deserves as well to be killed. Of course, here in a little bit, when she presents Aeschylus, her own lover, there's going to be some problems in this line of argument, no question, right? The chorus, however, is not only confused, but they are clearly upset. And in the process, they will say all kinds of interesting things. Like, for example, the chorus will say, whither shall I fly? Which, by the way, is the exact same thing that Macbeth says at the very end of the play when he has no place to run, right? For all in ruin sinks the kingly hall. By the way, whither shall I fly is also spoken by Lady Macduff in 4:2 of Macbeth. If you want to go back and look at that. Nor swift device, nor shift of thought have I to escape its fall. A little while the gentler raindrops fail. I stand distraught, a ghastly interval. Right? In other words, what is going on? The chorus will continue. Lo, sin by sin and sorrow dogged by sorrow, and who the end can know? The slayer of today shall die tomorrow. And again, I want to keep reiterating that clearly, when Shakespeare was writing his play Macbeth, this play was clearly in his mind. I mean, even the use of the word tomorrow here, right? The wage of wrong is woe, while time shall be. While Zeus in heaven is Lord, his law is fixed and stern. Now, this notion that Zeus is in control of everything is something that we'll have to debate here in a while. But the chorus is going to argue that things are going to, in the end, work out. Aeschylus will arrive, and when he does so, his first and opening lines, his first words, dawn of the day, we think about the opening of the play, of rightful vengeance hail. Notice he calls it rightful vengeance. In other words, Aeschylus is going to make the argument that both he and his lover, Clytemnestra, had the right to do what they did. For Aeschylus, of course, it has everything to do with the fact that we had that whole Thyestes story and all of that. Obviously, the sacrificing of Iphigenia will have, as we've already said, Clytemnestra's argument. Dawn of the day of rightful vengeance hail. I dare at length aver, promise, state firmly, that gods above have care of men in heed of earthly wrongs. I, who stand and thus exult to see this man lie wound in robes the Furies wove. Now, the fact that the word Furies gets used here is going to set us up for the final of the three plays of the Oresteia, because we're going to see something about these Furies, all right? We then will have the chorus, who will say, they'll begin to insult Aeschylus. They call him a womanish man, waiting till war did cease, home watcher and defiler of the couch, an arch deceiver of the chieftain's doom. Aeschylus will come back and he will say, bold words, you better watch out what you're saying, but they shall end in tears, the very converse thine of Orpheus's tongue. In other words, you better be careful. You could make the argument that the poet, the notion of the poet in Orpheus has been here the whole time, the beauty of this language, and yet it's Aeschylus that says you better watch it. The chorus comes back and it continues the insulting. Ah, thou art one to hold an Argive down, thou skilled to plan the murder of the king, but not with thine own hand to smite the blow. In other words, you let a woman do it. Aeschylus will say it though. My purpose holds, he says, to rule the citizens. In other words, it becomes clear that the motivation for Aeschylus is he wants to take over where Agamemnon was the king, and he wants to rule. So Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon. It's beautiful. It works out perfectly in every way. The chorus will finish by calling him a womanish man, and then the chorus will pray for Orestes' return. Now he said, ho, if anywhere the light of life smite on Orestes' eyes, let him returning by some guardian fate hew down with force his paramour and his mother. Oh, so in other words, the chorus is already beginning to predict. Clytemnestra will say, nay, enough, enough, my champion. We will smite and slay no more. Already we've reaped enough the harvest field of guilt. Enough of wrong and murder, let no other blood be spilt. Peace, old men, and pass away into the homes by fate decreed. In other words, she says it was a necessary deed, right? And then she finishes with a woman's word of warning, and let who will list thereto, right? The chorus is having none of it, and in fact, the chorus calls Aeschylus a dastard lord. And Aeschylus will say, ah, well, I know how exiles feed on hopes of their return, thinking about Orestes. And again, Aeschylus says, thou shalt pay, be well assured, heavy quietance for thy pride, as he's speaking to the chorus. The play will then end with Clytemnestra as she speaks directly to Aeschylus and as well to the chorus. Heed not thou too highly of them, the chorus. Let the cur-pack growl and yell. I and thou will rule the palace and will order all things well. It's significant that the last word of this play, Agamemnon, is the word well. Well, of course, we know things are not going to end well at all for either Clytemnestra or for Aeschylus. That's our next play. Let's pause for a moment, though, and look at level 2A with themes and messages. When you look at any kind of official or academic or scholarly treatment of this play, there's several major themes that always come to mind. One is obviously the theme of revenge, right? Blood will have blood, we actually have in this line, which again is quoted in Shakespeare's Macbeth. We're going to see more of this to come. The idea of revenge. Is it right? Is it wrong? Which is, of course, the second question of justice. Now, this is the main theme, really, of the Oresteia, and we're going to end with a courtroom scene and judgment and all of those kinds of things at the end of the Oresteia. I want to point out at 3A really quickly, though, remember that in Plato's Republic, we've given lectures on this at learnstrong.net, right? You can find those. We've given lectures on Plato's discussion of justice and what is justice and when is it ever right to get revenge, right? Another major question about justice is the justice of the gods. I mean, think about this. Cassandra's in the situation she's in because of Apollo, right? Agamemnon kills Iphigenia because of Artemis, right? Of course, Zeus is the one that's supposedly in control of all of this stuff. So the question becomes, is Zeus responsible? This is, of course, our theodicy question. Go back to our lectures on Milton's Paradise Lost for that idea of theodicy, the question of how is it possible that the gods, a all-powerful, all-loving deity, can allow for the existence of evil and suffering or pain in the world. Obviously, this is the theodicy question. Again, ask out loud, right? How about this question? Is there a difference, do you think, between revenge and justice? Are they the same thing? Are they different? And of course, this notion of justice in regards to the law is going to culminate with the final play of the Oresteia and the Furies. Another major message or theme is this question of fate, determinism, things are already determined, versus free will. And the question of how you decide when you are on the horns of a dilemma where there doesn't seem to be a good answer either way, right? Also, of course, this idea that you pay for the sins of your father or your grandfather, or in the case of our story of the house of Atreus, the great-grandfather, right, beginning with Tantalus. At level 2B in rhetoric, well, of course, we got a lot of symbols here, don't we, right? The symbol of the net, powerful one, the symbol of the net, or the robe, as it's sometimes translated, right? The ways that you can kind of get caught, and Agamemnon clearly walks right into this one, doesn't he? The main conflicts, what are they for you? Of course, the conflict of vengeance and revenge, the conflict of justice. I did this, but it was the right thing to do, and then trying to kind of defend yourself, and saying one more murder, or two in the case of Clytemnestra killing Cassandra and Agamemnon, we'll take care, let's let it all now lay low, and bygones will be bygones. Right? Well, we're going to see in the next play, not so much. By the way, notice all the pairs that Aeschylus will play games with here. It's brilliant, right? All the different pairs. Agamemnon and Cassandra. Cassandra and Clytemnestra. Clytemnestra and Aeschylus. And I mean, in this kind of pairing off can go on and on and on. What do you think's going on here? Well, one observation scholars have pointed out is, well, think about what this play and the Oresteia is really dealing with. Again, it's that notion of being on the horns of a dilemma, a nasty dilemma, where there's no real good answer either way. If I do this, I'm jacked. If I do this, I'm jacked. What do I do? If I don't do anything, I'm jacked. Right? Notice, of course, Shakespeare's Hamlet comes to mind. To be or not to be. Oh yeah, a play about a son who has to avenge the death of his father, and he has to decide whether to kill his mother, and of course kill his daddy's brother, his uncle Claudius. Right? Shakespeare clearly playing games in regards to all of these. Well, since we're there, let's talk 3A really quickly in relationship to other texts. Let's play the game first with Greek texts. Of course, the Iliad and the Odyssey are really important. This story, as we've been telling it, the homecoming of Agamemnon, stands behind so many of the events as they are being portrayed in both the Iliad and the Odyssey. Right? We've already mentioned Plato's Republic, another classic Greek text. Of course, everybody who read Plato's classic dialogue, the Republic, knew this story and understood the question then about what is justice? When is it right to exact an eye for an eye? Right? Other Greek tragedies come to mind. Of course, we're going to see this in the Libation Bearers of the next play, and of course, culminating in this text, the Furies, as we finish with the Oresteia. We've mentioned Shakespeare. Macbeth comes to mind, and Clytemnestra is kind of like a creation in many ways, a prototype of that Lady Macbeth-like person. Okay, we think of Shakespeare's Hamlet, right? We've already mentioned Ophelia. Remember in that play that Hamlet, the young man, will say to Ophelia's daddy, Polonius, that he's like Jephthah. Now, this is a reference to not Greek mythology, but to biblical stories. Judges chapter 11, of course, the sacrifice of another young girl by a famous warrior named Jephthah. We've got this storyline happening in multiple places, don't we, right? I would like to as well suggest that it's clear that Shakespeare likes to take the questions that are often resurrected by these impossible kinds of conundrums, these dilemmas, and he likes to play them out on the Elizabethan stage as well. To finish at 3A, what for you is your favorite movie or video game, TV show that plays this same thing, where there's like two, jot that one down, where there's like two options and neither option works very well, but you got to choose one of the two, because to do nothing is also not a good option, right? You're jacked either way, we might say. Finally at 3B, well, again, if we're going to study this stuff, let's try and make it personal so that way we can remember it, we can relate to it in some meaningful way. Let's ask several questions here. For you, who is the hero of this text? Do you see Agamemnon as the tragic hero of the text? Do you see Clytemnestra as kind of the hero of the text? Because she's waited 10 years, and she's plotted, and she's put together a very good plot, and she's done it, and it works, and she exacts her revenge. Iphigenia was her daughter, for crying out loud. Doesn't she have a right to jack Agamemnon, who will sacrifice their daughter? Or do you see maybe the hero of the text, as many students of this text today will read it, and they see Cassandra as the amazing tragic hero. She really has no choice in the matter. She really does kind of look a lot like Ophelia in Shakespeare's Hamlet. She is affected by all of the different things that are happening around her, but it's not her fault at all. Do you pity Agamemnon? How about this for a 3B question? Do you pity Agamemnon, right? I mean, he comes home, he's just won the war, he finally thinks his life is so much better now, and and he's jacked. If you don't pity Agamemnon, then why do you think the play is named The Agamemnon? Okay, think about that one. Finally, of course, it's this question. Since we're talking about on the horns of a nasty dilemma, when was the last time that you were kind of stuck on the horns of one of those nasty dilemmas, right? Where there really was not a good choice either way. How did you decide? On what grounds did you make your decision? And do you think it was a just decision now looking back? Well, let's turn now in Lecture 61 to the second of the 3 plays of the Oresteia, the libation bearers, and what happens when Orestes shows up, right? Well, talk about your dysfunctional family. You're going to have a young man who's going to show up. And oh yeah, by the way, Agamemnon never even asked about his other daughter, Electra. We're going to meet her in the next play as well. Thank you. I hope you come back to study some more with me.